Hey guys, welcome to BowHunterPlanet. And on this quick interview day, I wanted to talk with Mr. John Dudley himself about a lot of things. Actually, I have a lot of good questions for you, John. But one of the things that when people think about archery, your name comes up a lot, and the reason is you're so good at teaching archery, teaching people how to get into it. Being a part of the industry for so long as you have, it's really incredible. But I was going to ask you, the first question I wanted to lead off with today with you on this is just a little bit of briefing about your history, because honestly, I didn't even know some of the history that we talked about on the phone offline. We were talking the one day about your past and how you kind of got from point A to where you're at today, whatever is point Z or whatever. But could you take us real quickly
Yeah, point
through
Z right now.
that towards the end? Where we at?
Yeah, as I'm quickly approaching 50, I'm like,
I hear you.
I mean, it would be awesome if I was only at point B because I got more time to go. But I feel like, sometimes I'm like, dude, how, this is way longer than what you expected. It's honestly a blessing because, there's really no other sport, at least that I did, that athletes are still able, to be in a good place, let alone possibly their best place, the more they mature. And that's one of the things that's so amazing about archery. And it's honestly one of the reasons why the National Archery in the School program was so important. And, that got pulled away earlier this year from an administration rule that was going to pull funding away from like schools being able to use that NASP and stuff. But what I love about NASP, which was kind of started early on in my career too, when I was at Matthews at the time, was we just came to find out that the amount of teachers, the amount of parents that immediately were saying, my kid didn't play, he didn't want to do football. He's not fast, you know, my daughter's a little bit overweight, my daughter's a little bit intimidated, doesn't like a team atmosphere or is intimidated by that. Whereas with archery, you can see, every few years at Vegas, an old timer comes in and freaking kicks butt, and then all of a sudden the new kids do it. So there's really there's no age restriction. There's no body weight slash mass index. It's not like you have to be an NFL person to be really awesome at archery. And there's also not an there's not an age restriction anywhere. I've got people that are in their 70s picking up archery, and you can get them a really comfortable 50-pound bow, and they're going to tacks and being at it. I was at a tack where there was three generations of archers, and the grandfather was pretty much there to support all the other boys, and it was they were loving the fact that Gramps was out there on a tack range with them. That's one of the things that I love about archery, is that you can get it, the entry point is wherever you want to start, and you can begin. And my dream and my passion is to create a way to where people can come in at an entry level position and honestly be better than I was after right now a lot of people are better than I was after 2 decades of me fiddling around trying to figure all this stuff out on my own, and doing everything wrong, or solidifying really poor habits that felt damn near impossible to get rid of. And I've just tried to boil all that down to just simplify it for people and give people just a really easy way to come in and start learning archery, and I'll honestly get products that I personally use and I personally trust, and just make it easy. That's kind of my passion.
Yeah, that's really cool. So your history takes you from Matthews, and I believe I could be wrong here, so you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you worked at Hoyt at one point as well, or shot
Yeah,
for
so
Hoyt.
I did I guess just to go back, if we just want to talk timeline. So I started shooting when I was 9, and I think my first whitetail with a bow was when I was 10 years old. And then I would only really get to hunt when we would go down to my southern family's place for Thanksgiving and Easter's, which was always like good for deer, good for turkeys. And I didn't get to do it a lot because I lived with my family up in the north, up in a Chicago suburb, and we would travel down to Mississippi, which is kind of where most of my grassroots family was from, and they were all bow hunters and deer hunters and turkey hunters. So I just really looked forward to that 1 week in the fall where we'd go visit family, and the week in the spring when we'd go down there to visit family. And so I did it then, but then I also got very competitive athletically in high school, so I wasn't able to like be a full-time archer by any means. I loved archery, but I was strictly a hunter. And then what happened was I was recruited for football and really thought that I was, my life was going to be football until I didn't have a choice.
Hmm.
School wasn't really in my vocabulary, and I was very, very lucky in um the fact that like what happened was I went to this little archery shoot. It was a local 3D shoot. I didn't even know there were really 3D shoots, but I happened to like turn down this little road. It was actually the summer before I started my football, and there was just a sign that said, archery shoot. And I went down there and went to this little range, and honestly, about halfway through this tournament, I was out of arrows, and honestly, it was like drilled into my head. You finish what you start. You finish what you start. So I freaking left the shoot. I like literally had to. I'm like, I'm out of arrows, guys. Sorry, and I like left, and I drove to a Gander Mountain, bought some more arrows on a credit card, went back, and by then they were all like doing the awards, and there was there was three guys up like getting their little trophies that all had matching shirts, and they said Gat Guns. I think it said Elgin or Dundee, Illinois. And so when the awards thing was over, I went up to the person that was organizing the shoot and I said, "Hey, can I go back out and finish? I'm like, I don't care. I don't need a scorecard or anything. I just need to finish the course." And I stumbled through it, kind of fumbled through it, and then that was on a Sunday. Monday, right after I got done pouring concrete, I was hauling wheelbarrows, helping pour concrete during the summer before I left for college. I ended up in that Gat Guns and just started watching people and asking questions. And while I was in there, the owner of this shop, or not the owner, but the manager, evidently was behind on some people's arrows. So he just said, "Hey, kid, what are you doing?" And I told him, "Nothing, just sitting here watching people that are good at this." And he said, "Come in the back. I need your help." So he showed me how to fletch arrows, and he's like, "I need you to do this." So I started fletching arrows, and then fast forward like 4 days later, I was still fletching arrows, and he was handing out paychecks to the other employees, but like nothing to me. So I said like, "Hey, am I getting paid for this?" And he looked at me like with just the straightest face. His name was Mike Donovan, and he goes, "You can't put a price tag on what you're learning here." And and I just said, "Well, I can't put gas in my tank
To
to
get
get
it.
here if I'm not, and I'm like, but I want to come, I want to learn." And so I started he offered me 410 an hour,
Wow.
which was my first job. And honestly, I loved it so much that I ended up getting involved with tournaments, and I ended up leaving college to go work for Gat Guns for 410 an hour. They opened at noon, so I continued pouring concrete in the morning. At noon, I'd go to the shop and be there till 9 at night. But then on the weekends, I would go to shoots, and I started shooting competitively in 94. 90, well, no, I started shooting competitively, and this is at a local competitive level in 94. By 96, I was traveling to a lot of like bigger shoots like IBO Triple Crowns and stuff like that. 97. So you're talking only 2 years. And actually, during that 2 years, I left that shop and opened my own shop, which I
Wow.
was kind of running on the,
Holy cow.
running on the side. And I ended up turning pro at the end of 97. And during that time, I actually had my own archery shop, but I sold high country bows. I wanted to sell Matthews because they were booming, but I was too close to another Matthews dealer. And I actually went to, this is a very long story, but it's, for me, it's just amazing how this whole road paved out. So I went to the ASA World Championship in Atlanta that year. This was in 97, and it was like when 452 first came out on bows. It might not even been, no, it wasn't 452, it was just 450. And Vectran is like, it's not very pliable, Vectran. That's why now there's blends. There's like 452X, but back in those original times, the cams had like very sharp power curves and stuff like that. So when that string was like being bent a lot, they would just detonate sometimes with some of those very first S4 or 450 materials. So I ended up on the practice range day one. I was shooting a high country at the time, pulled it back, and it just blew up. And I thought I was screwed, but luckily, the Chapel brothers had really taken me under their wing and started to teach me archery and really taught me how to be a pro. But Sonny was a Matthews shooter, and Sonny ended up giving me his backup bow to shoot in the worlds, and I ended up in the finals, tied with two other guys. Went into a one arrow sudden death shootout, and I had a Matthews. So I ended up making the podium with the Matthews, and Matthews was only 2 hours from where I was. They were north of me in Sparta, Wisconsin. And I actually talked to them about shooting, and they didn't want to sponsor me or anything like that. Joel ended up saying, if you want to buy two bows, you can buy two bows at like a reduced cost. Well, I shot the thing so dang good that that's what I did. I bought two bows at cost my rookie year. And truthfully, I had a paid contract opportunity from Oneida, but
Dang.
I just couldn't shoot them. I
Yeah.
just couldn't shoot them. And so I actually drove up to Matthews and picked up my first two bows, and I met Matt and Joel. And this is when they had just moved to Sparta. And I ended up going to the ATA show, and I was at the booth, and I just started helping out. And I was just kind of being myself. I was helping out, explaining things to people, telling them what I liked and what I didn't like about the stuff. And then on that Monday, this would have been 97. On that Monday, Matt McPherson called me, and he said, I'm getting ready to hire our third sales rep, and your name keeps coming up. I'd like you to come up here. And so I went up and met with them, and Matt ended up offering me a job as a sales assistant. At the time, there were two main sales reps, and then I got hired as an assistant. And then, honestly, right after me, Brad True got hired for the same exact role, but we were in like we did different demographics of the states. And um, yeah, that's where it started, 97.
Wow.
And literally going into Matthews right when the perimeter weighted technology hit, which totally changed the game in single cam bows. So I started at Matthews as a sales assistant, and then fast forward 9 years later, I continued to shoot pro. By that time, I was international sales and marketing manager, but I also shot for the U.S. team at that time. And I ended up leaving. Just some stuff I've never really talked about publicly, but just a very weird day where I went from just being super super close to everybody, and honestly one of the original core people that started there, to just some stuff happened, and there were some internal rule changes. I guess I'll kind of keep it vague, but there was some internal rule changes that were about to affect me. And to be honest, the ultimatum I was given was that as a company, we are no longer going to travel. And that also meant that even though I was a shooter, I couldn't travel as well because I was an employee to the company.
Gotcha.
And so, I just kind of said, I'm not going to let people that I don't even hang out with like change my path. And I just said, this is what I'm meant to do. I can't believe you don't want to have me, shoot anymore or travel anymore based on, things that had nothing to do with
Yep.
me. And so, Matt was actually, I think, offended at that time that I would not be like, it was kind of a question of loyalty.
Yeah.
Now that I'm older, I look back at it and I realize, when you're an employer and you're like grooming a young person, there comes a point where, you kind of, I don't know, you just make decisions. But anyway, because I said, he kind of just looked at me, he's like, wait, are you telling me you would leave me if you can't do, what you want? And I just said, well, if you're telling me this, then yeah, that is what I'm saying. And I think it just, for Matt, because I was so close to the technology, there weren't a lot of people internally that saw things early. And there certainly weren't people that would be shooting them early.
Yeah.
Whereas that was one of the things that I did, I would shoot our bows and and I would help set them up, and there was 3 or 4 of us that were pretty close to Matt.
Yep.
And so I ended up just saying, yeah, if that's what you're saying, I'm going to leave. And honestly, I ended up, this is what happens with employees. You think that that you're not expendable,
Always
and
are.
you can't be replaced, and the reality is everybody's replaceable,
Yep.
all the time.